Hi guys, girls. Welcome to No Bullshit Gymcast. Okay, I have the ultimate OG gunslinger here, Trevor Chung. Trev, please tell them who you are, your background, what we used to do back in the day, because I can remember legendary Sundays at your old gym, mate. So, yeah, guys, this is Trev. Welcome, Trev.
Hi everyone. My name is Trevor Chung, and I started competing back in the 80s. So as a young lad, did my first show as a junior, British Championships as an under 18, British Championships as under 21, as a novice, as a mister, um, British Championships with UKBFF, with EFBB, with WABBA. WABBA World Championships, and a whole host of shows, almost 50 shows in total over the years, and really enjoyed every minute of it. I used to own a little gym in Leighton Buzzard where Chris was a member, and was really an advocate of heavy duty Mike Mentor, Dorian Yates training.
We had some wicked times there, mate, didn't we, at Colosseum? Mate, one person you'll remember who listens on my Instagram, which this will go out on parts of. Remember Rhino?
Rhino, remember him well.
Rhino still follows me now. So,
and a really good time in bodybuilding, and a time that I do miss those days.
Those days were amazing. Now, Trev, what do you feel is lacking in modern day bodybuilding now?
I think if we're talking about now, as opposed to when I was competing,
yeah.
I mean, I lived through a time in the 90s I was competing, and that was what most people would regard as the golden era of bodybuilding. It's where we had all the big names, all the big characters, all the great physiques were from that time. And I think to summarize it, I think back in the 80s and 90s, I started bodybuilding so that I could stand out. I wanted to be different. I wanted to stand out from everybody else, which I did. And now I feel the aspect is, and it's a product of bodybuilding's popularity growth, is that now everyone's doing bodybuilding to fit in. It's not such a niche sport as what it was. It's much, much more popular. It's much, much more mainstream. And that's what the sport has had to do for it to grow financially. But I think in that commercialism of bodybuilding, it's lost that community that what it was. So around the gyms and around the bodybuilding competitions, when I go to them, I just don't feel that sense of community that I used to feel when I was competing. When I was competing, I knew everybody. Everybody I knew. I was, our little gym was in Leighton Buzzard, but I would meet up with the guys, Doug Kelly and Andy from Metroflex. We'd have a good old chat. It'd be really good to see them. I'd meet guys from Muscleworks. I'd meet guys from Iron Bodies. There's guys from all over the place that used to come together for these contests. And it was a real community. It was a real friendly competition because we was all in this together. And I don't feel that that's there anymore. I think people are more focused on individual popularity, individual likes, more focused on Instagram presence than what they are actually winning competitions.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you, mate. Really, like I can remember back in our day when you ran the gym, it didn't matter how good you were, what your genetics were. It was, take for instance our Sunday leg day. Like I was probably, and I can hack pretty well compared to you and your squatting. You used to do 5 plates a side, guys. This guy can squat. But we had all talent from literally novices all the way through to yourself, training together as one. You wouldn't see that now. Not at all.
for me and our ethos back then, it was the beauty of bodybuilding was that everybody can improve. It doesn't matter where you are, it doesn't matter where you started, but you can be better tomorrow than you are today. And that was the system that we worked on. And we weren't above taking plates on and off for people. We weren't on and off, slowing the tempo down if we needed to.
Oh,
We wasn't above all of that. And again, it was this community of people that were trying to get better,
mm,
and we were all different stages of development. But that wasn't what was important. What was important that we was there for each other, pushing each other to improve within our own personal sphere.
yeah, I remember Sick Bucket Sunday, it got nicknamed, didn't it, Trev?
Yeah, but we had people like myself who was competing at the time. We had other people who were doing first timer shows. They were getting ready for it. We had people who weren't competing at all. We had Big Mick used to come up from Croydon, used
Yeah.
to come up to Leighton Buzzard just to do legs with us on the Sunday. There was a lot of stuff going on that it was a level of intensity that we was proud of. And I'm not saying that nobody else is doing that, but I think it's just that level of community and that level of welcoming that we had for everybody and anybody to just jump in.
I find it's, as Dorian said, I was watching an old piece or an interview Dorian did the other day, actually. He said modern gyms are just clinical. And
Absolutely. If you look at um, even within the brands, if you look at gyms now, there is an expectation them to be look like high-end commercial gyms.
mm,
But 20 kilos, 20 kilo. It doesn't matter if it's rubber, if it's steel. If you remember the old 25 kilo plate, the 45 kilo plates we had at the Colosseum, that I got them from Powercraft, who got them from Bob.
yeah,
They were like, I mean, did they weigh 45? They were like handmade plates
yeah,
that we were using with sometimes.
absolutely mega heavy back in the day. It was a great community feel, like you said. Now, I just feel modern bodybuilding has, like you said, has become very individualized. Even though it was individualized, there was still, you turn up at a show and, like, say for instance, Colosseum had 4 or 5 guys competing from there. We'd all turn up at that show and there'd be probably about 15, 20 of us. You're lucky if you get 3 or 4 from your own little group going with you these days. And I just think, like I say, it's very individualized. It's about likes. It's about how do I say it? Yeah, I've got to be popular.
Yeah, and the problem that you have with that is that I feel that across the board, the overall standard of physiques has improved across the whole board. So if you was to look at, for example, going back into the 90s, back in the capital city in the Mr. Titan, you'd inevitably get one guy and they'd announce him. Our next contestant is Brian, and he trains at home. And this guy would come out. He didn't have any idea about bodybuilding shows. He'd never been to a bodybuilding show before. He would come out. He's got no tan on. He's not really dieted. He'd have a pair of Speedo trunks on, and it wasn't that he was. You don't get that now. Everyone knows what's going on.
Yeah.
Everyone knows what's expected, and everyone's got a coach.
Mm.
And you don't get that anymore. And the thing with it was like, Brian, although he would probably be a little bit embarrassed, people would still respect what Brian's done. He's trained in his garage, and he's trained to what he thinks is a good standard. But the reality is, you only know what you see.
Mm.
If you've never been to a proper bodybuilding gym, you don't know what a proper bodybuilder looks like.
Oh,
and I've seen those Brians take themselves off, go away, and then come back a few years later with a way better physique and actually become competitors.
Yeah.
Now, back in the 80s and early 90s, there was an Asian guy called Paddy Chatterjee, and he was a Brian. And he used to turn up at the Titan and the London and South East every year. And every year, you'd see Paddy Chatterjee get better and better and better. One year we won the Southeast and he placed at the Britain. And that's what you can do by being in that sort of environment and being in an encouraged environment and not being called out on social media, by having people who are in that community put an arm around you and say, look, this is what you've got to do.
Mm.
But you don't get that now. Now, if a guy turns like that, he's a meme on Instagram.
100%.
And it's just like, it's
Remember,
ruined it.
remember your first show you did in Leighton? Remember
The first one at the library.
At the library, the very first one. And we had some lad, literally pure white, Casper white, turn up on these jet black. It was literally like zebra crossing. White parts, black trunks, and everyone just went and stopped. Yeah. And then what happened? Everyone applauded him because he did his routine. And next minute, we were all shocked. Even though he didn't have a ruckload of muscle on him, he was only a first timer. But oh my God. But white is white. Now that would have been ridiculed.
Would have been ridiculed. But, you know, at the end of the day, it wasn't terrible. it was all right, lad. But he just never seen a bodybuilding contest before. And you get a lot less than that. I think at top level, top level, so say at like sort of top national standard amateur and going into professional and above, I think probably, excuse me, it probably isn't as good as it was back in the 90s. I think back at the British Championships level, when you had like JD winning it, Amory Francis winning it, Mick Theo, you know, a GK, even up coming up into the 2000s, the early 2000s, I think the standard was higher than what you see now.
Yeah.
And I remember sort of like towards the tail end of my competitive career, I think it was like really an achievement to get into the amateur Olympia, get into the amateur Arnold, and you know we had to be selected for that. Whereas these days now, I mean, you could just pay your way into it.
Well, I had a client in America. Well, she lives in Canada. She did the amateurs this year.
Yeah.
So, you know, she did the amateur Arnolds this year. So she just rocked up, paid for it, done, dusted. I can remember when you got ready for, I think it was the Arnolds in Madrid.
That's right, yeah.
2011. 2011.
Something like that. 2011, 2012, something like
that. And Kai nearly pushed you over on the floor, didn't he, accidentally?
I ran flat out into Kai, and no, it was a really, really good show. I mean, I was out there with some really, really good athletes, and it was a lot of fun. Yeah. But nowadays, I mean, you don't really even have to qualify if you've got enough to spend on the travel and the entry fee.
Yeah.
You're in.
Yeah.
You know, when I was competing, there was one pro card per year.
Exactly.
In the UK. Now there's probably like 100.
Yeah, definitely. So do you feel that sort of, I can remember Flex going on about this, saying he had to win the British before he got his his pro card, etc., etc., etc. And it was only one pro card that year given away. Do you find it's just silly easy now? Since like probably I think I remember reading a report, 18 pro cards got given out during COVID, the first year of COVID alone.
Yeah.
You know.
I don't, I just want to be clear. I don't think it's easy to get a pro card. I still think you have to be an exceptional bodybuilder. But I don't think you need to be as good as what you had to be back in the day. Like if we talk about some of the guys who really had to work to get a pro card and had to turn up year after year, and some of the amazing physiques that didn't get a pro card and just went over and over again through the British ranks trying to get that pro card and never did. I think compared to them, those guys, I think the route now is much, much easier. And, you know, if you've got guys like like Jamo Nazar,
Yeah.
took several attempts to get a pro card back in the day. He'd get it easy now. You know, he'd just rock up. He'd pull it out first time,
Yeah,
pull
yeah,
it out the bag. The GK Nikkei, he'd just pull it out the bag first time.
yeah,
Herman Yimane, probably the best 90 kilo physique I've ever seen.
yeah.
And he didn't win a pro card in his first few couple of years. So, you know, I think nowadays, I think if you're one of those top guys, I think it's just by the numbers. If we're giving out 100 pro cards a year, that 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 pool is just so much bigger of people that we're going to turn pro. But how many people are looking at a professional career? Like 1%.
Yeah. But do you think that's diluted the standard of it because there is, say, for instance, 100 pro cards?
Well, of course, because the thing with it is, and if you look at Jamo, for example, he came in two, three times better and better and better to get his pro card.
Mm.
And now if he just won it first time, he will not improve how he improved.
Mm.
And if you look at what's going on in the pro scene now, you know, it's very, very difficult. Very, very difficult. And you know, if I'm honest, the guys who are doing well were always going to do well. You can pick them out a mile away. To drop a name, Graham Hollinshead,
Yeah, yeah.
fantastic bodybuilder, but he was a fantastic bodybuilder when he was 19.
Mm.
You know, he was always going to be good. I always said to him, "You're going to be the next big thing here."
Mm. Definitely.
And you know, look how long. You know, when he was 19, that's almost like 16 years ago.
Yeah, I know.
So 16, 17 years ago when I'm talking about, and you know, now he's just breaking into the top six, just breaking into that Olympia. And that's what it takes.
Yeah. So it's like I say, the higher you get, the harder it gets. But I just feel personally they should make it a little bit harder still to get a pro card, even to this day. Not
Well, there's
necessarily
the
only
whole
1 year, but you know, shrink it down so the quality is even bigger and better.
well the thing with it with the pro card, it's like it's not just for competing. You know, there's this whole illusion that having IFBB Pro on your
On your
business card
Instagram handle, yeah.
get you a million clients
Yeah.
for PT, and it's just not because it just doesn't affect that many people.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. Like you can see, like this is I said this on another podcast yesterday about influencers and stuff like that. Is you know, you've got some people who are doing one show. Say for instance, first time I did a WABBA show, and they came top 3. Guarantee you, someone will go, "Oh yeah, I've just placed top 3 at a WABBA show. Da 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 da. I'm now a coach."
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I've seen people. I know people that are coaching that have never done a show. Now, I mean, for me, I feel it's important to go through that process just so you can have empathy for your clients. Because if you've never been through that process, and you and I both know, and you know how many people I've coached
Oh,
over the
mate.
years,
Yeah, yeah,
60% of people don't make it to the show on their first attempt.
yeah.
And that's a fact. And the reality of that is it's not as glamorous or fun as you think it's going to be.
No, I can tell you guys, girls, this guy called me out about 12 years ago, maybe a bit longer. And literally, only time I've probably ever heard Trev say, "Wow, okay, take it back." You took it
Yeah,
back, didn't you? I was like, I've never heard this guy take it back ever. And I've known you
no,
how long? Since what, 2001? Something like that, 2 2?
yeah, at least. But you know, for me, you know, I'm not afraid to say I was wrong.
Oh,
I'm not afraid to eat my words, and that's not what this is about. You know,
no,
coaching's not about calling out people
no,
to be horrible or anything.
no.
It's about getting the best out of people.
He,
Now,
he
some people you can push them, and some people have to be coached. And you know, for me, I think with knowing who you'd worked with in the past, I
yeah,
felt like at that time,
yeah.
I thought like let's really see what he can do
Mm.
if he gets a bit between his teeth. And God bless you, you did.
Yeah, man. No, like guys, I'm not here. I'm not saying Trev advocate. We advocate like calling people out, but Trev called me out because yeah, he knew we've known each other a very long time. He knew what buttons to press on me, and it did. And boy, did it, come out. It was great. But at the end of the day, life goes forwards. So, Trev, what? Obviously, we know each other through. Obviously, I've trained in your gym. You've coached me a little bit over the times. We've trained together a lot. We also judged together, didn't we?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So this guy got me my judging, got me into judging with WABBA. Um, Also sponsored a pro show in 2019, didn't we?
Yes, we did. Yes, absolutely.
It was very good up at the NEC. So, Trip, do you feel life after bodybuilding is as glamorous as people say it is, or is it a case of it's harder now after being a competitor at high standard than it is just being a normal gym person and just living a normal life?
I think you have to put that into a little bit of context. So, like as a competitor, I did my first show as a teenager, and I pursued it. I had it into my head that if I didn't turn professional by 30, I would do something else. So that was always the plan. But then when I was 30, I was like placing in the Britain, and I was close,
Yeah, you're right.
close enough to sort of give it a little bit more, and it did push on a little bit more than that. And I was very, very fortunate to be adaptable. For me, life after competing, and like you'll know yourself, and some of the viewers will know, it was through health issues that
Yeah, it was.
I really stopped
Mm.
competing. And so, that was a bit of a crash for me, to have the kidney failure and to make that realization that things had to change. This dream of bodybuilding prowess, having that physique, and having, that confidence and that aura that gives you was going to change. And that was a decision that something that had to happen. I didn't have a lot of choice out of that. But then I was fortunate to have a decent PT database, and a other skills that meant I could have a career outside of bodybuilding, which was important for me.
Yeah, yeah.
And then the thing with bodybuilding itself, there's so many attributes that you acquire through bodybuilding. That level of discipline, that focus, that single-mindedness, that you can apply to anything else in your life, which is very, very fortunate for me.
Yeah, it was. It is. So do you feel like, obviously, don't want to go delving in on your health as much as you probably don't want to talk about it, but I know how serious it was. Um, do you feel in this modern era now that people are abusing? And I'm not stating here, ladies and gents, Trev did not abuse PEDs, full stop. But do you feel nowadays it's used liberally a lot more than it was back in the day?
So I would say there's a lot more facilities more readily available to people for them to keep a check on their health. So it's easy to get bloods done. It's easy to get checks done. Um, I think there's a lot more awareness. You've got to remember that I was using steroids at a time when people didn't really understand it. And You know, we were using peptides at the real cutting edge of them being created. So like we were using stuff that we didn't know, excuse me, the long-term effects of.
Mhm.
Um, but I do feel that back then steroids were limited to very much you were limited to where you could get them. You were limited to what you could get, and it was like really quite secular to the bodybuilding community. So it was people that were competing or had aspirations for competing. Whereas nowadays, I think anyone who's training's got access to or is taking steroids.
Yeah. So obviously, guys,
Much more widespread.
yeah, you've been after bodybuilding and after judging and all of the above. You went back into the gym sector of the world, didn't you? With management and stuff like that. Now, do you feel if you walked into, say, a commercial gym, we won't mention brands, but a decent commercial gym, do you reckon you could spot more people on it than off it?
I would say, I mean, you know, I've been working in commercial gyms for about 15 years. And I would say it's much more now than it was then. I think for me, um, and this will come alongside the whole fact of the general standard of physiques from bottom up has improved, but a lot more people are taking steroids, definitely.
What's your opinion then? If obviously, is that across the board from both sexes? Do you feel that the quality's gone up a bit because of that, or do you feel women's quality within the lower divisions of, say, physique or a very good figure level down has now sort of declined away from what, shall we say, bikini was?
Oh, I would say proportionally, the women's game's advanced way more than the men's game over the last 10 years. I'd say that the level of women from just from gym bodies upwards,
Mhm,
I think has improved massively over the last 20 years.
mhm.
And I would say, you know, we probably need a bit of a reset with the classes. So I just saw some pictures online. Good friend of mine, Anthony Chia Bradley, just
Yeah,
attended a couple of contests. He's just photographed the NABBA Southeast, which was
yeah,
at Charter Hall in Colchester. And I think he did another show the other week. I think it was Pure Elite.
yeah, yeah,
And um, if I'm honest, I struggle to tell you what class is what. And I'm an experienced judge.
yeah, yeah.
I'm an experienced judge. And you know, from looking at the pictures, it's like, well, you know, and part of that is there's too many classes, but you know, is she wellness? Is she toned figure?
Yeah.
What is she?
Yeah, yeah. I can remember the Rhino Classic. I flew back from Oz for you, didn't I? And Neil Cromwell walked in, and I said to you, "Well, that's game over. That's that class easily done and dusted." But I can remember that. I think it was something like 28 girls on the in the bikini class, and that
Hmm?
stage wasn't particularly big, was it? And we
No.
had to do it in splits of six or something, didn't we? I was like,
Yeah.
oh my God, that was one complicated like class to do. So I'd
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, bikini has advanced a lot over the years. And you know, it's the problem with bodybuilding and bodybuilding related classes is that in the simplest terms, the best way to improve is to come in bigger and harder. But that's not applicable to ladies' classes. It's not applicable to bikini.
no,
And you know, it is the federations and the judges' job to dictate what the right condition and the right size is for bikini. And the people who don't fit that class need to be put into the right class,
yeah,
which is something that we always used to do at WABBA.
we did,
We would have all the girls out
Yeah.
and we would advise whoever that they may be in the wrong class. Ultimately, the decision's in the place of the athlete,
Yeah.
but ultimately, we have a duty of care to make sure that everyone's in the right class for them.
Hmm. So after your life of bodybuilding competing, what made you decide to go down the judging route?
Well, for me, I've always loved bodybuilding. I mean, I've been in love with bodybuilding since I was like 12 years
Obsessed,
old.
mate. Obsessed, I would say.
12 years old. I mean, I remember back in the 80s, um, Channel 4 started and they were showing some obscure different things that you never saw on the other three channels. And um, one of the things that they showed was the World Games where Buried the May won when he was 22.
Yeah, yeah.
And I saw that and I thought, you know what? That's what I'm going to do. And that's what I pursued my whole life. And so for me, judging was, it was a logical step. It was a way for me to stay involved and to have an element of influence, an element of being able to give something back. We've all been in contests where we feel we've been on the wrong end of judging.
Yeah.
I've been in shows that I felt that I should have won.
Mm.
But on the B side of that, I've been in shows where I thought I probably shouldn't have won as well. So, trying to be a part of it, don't don't be a part of the problem, be a part of the solution.
Mm.
Is the um, attitude that I adopted. And when I joined WABBA, where I did most of my judging, I did my best to sort of try and help to standardize the way things were judged.
Yeah. Well, I think we did a pretty good job.
Yeah, I mean, I still love WABBA. I still love the guys. Massimo Gianni, they do
Yeah.
an amazing job of organizing it. And, what they've done in Italy is it's not to be sniffed at, mate. Nearly 2,000 members
Yeah.
in Italy, and all fantastic physiques. The Italian championships regularly has 300 athletes in the final.
That's good.
Um, I think for me, like I said before, the one thing that I'll probably wish that bodybuilding hadn't done was just fragment the classes as much as they have.
Mm.
I think there's too many classes. It makes the day too long and it makes it
Oh,
not enjoyable for the
mate.
athlete.
I had my client who's now in Canada. She's actually working with another coach. She wanted to work face to face with someone. I said, that's fine, it's not a problem. I can't work face to face with you. I'm here, you're in Canada. But we had to do, for some strange reason, she spoke to the IFBB in or the NPC in Canada, and they said, "Yeah, no, you're going to have to do a qualifier in the UK just to qualify to be able to compete in Canada because your visas hadn't been granted at the time." So there's me left nine days notice just to get some form of show ready. Luckily, she doesn't really go off season at all, really. So we did a little mini cut. She came fifth out of nine at a show down in Maidenhead. I was like, pleased. She was pleased. She got into Canada. She competed, came fifth there. And she got a major shock of her life, even though she had a virus on the day and a temperature of 39.9. Yeah, she had a big shock. The girls over there are a bit bigger in bikini, just a tad.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a bit crazy, but it was the class. Like she didn't. I think she went on stage at like 6 o'clock that night.
Yeah. But it's not enjoyable as an athlete. It's not enjoyable as a spectator. It's just too much.
Mm.
But people are making money from entry fees. People are making money from classes. Every athlete that's paying a federation membership, they're paying. You go to some of these shows, They got to pay for entry. They got to use their tanning service.
Yeah.
They've got to use their bikini service.
That whole
It's a
show,
lot.
yeah, that whole show cost her just to do that was close to 600 quid. I was
Yeah,
like,
but there's some shows that it's a couple of grand to do it.
mate, you can't afford that,
You
can
know,
you?
once you've paid for the costume using
Mm,
their supplier, you've had your tan there, you've
yeah,
paid your membership, you've paid your entry fee.
hair and makeup.
It's nigh on a couple of grand, and it's like, well, that's a lot of money. You
Mm,
know, if you've got 100 people paying that,
yeah,
that's a decent income.
it is. It is. But yeah, no, I miss those days. I miss the back in the days of when we were like judging and stuff like that. But your life, your from your perspective, like I'd like to just ask you, give everyone a bit of detail of like I don't want every nook and cranny of your health and stuff, but obviously a lot of these youngsters nowadays, yes, they're probably on PEDs, they're probably doing all sorts of stuff. What bit of advice would you give everyone who does bodybuilding or to a decent level of it, or even to the gym population? What would you give them advice, sound advice of looking after yourself? Because obviously the longevity is key.
Longevity is key. I mean, I would honestly say that if you're not competing, forget about it. Forget about it. You know what you're doing to to just look a little bit better doing the street. You can do that naturally. You
Mm-hmm.
know, eat properly, um, get your rest, train hard. You know, and we've seen it
Yeah.
in the gym. We've seen some people, or just for example, well, I'm not giving away any name, but James, the copper down the gym,
Yeah.
absolutely natural,
Yep.
great physique. It's not that it's not possible. You can do it, and you should do it.
Mm-hmm.
If you are competing, I would say, um, just from my own experience, get yourself checked out regular, um, take regular breaks, um, and yeah, just make sure you're doing what you got to do.
Okay, so on the back end of that question, then, so obviously nowadays, back in the day when I'm not adverse to telling people I've been there, done it, won the gear as well. Um, always had breaks, etc., etc. But obviously for the guys and girls, or guys specifically, who are in their later of their lives, and this common perception, oh, I'm just taking TRT levels.
Yeah, I think some people are kidding themselves with that.
TRT,
They're
500,
having
500,
they're having
mate, 500 megs a week. Yeah. But 500 megs, honestly, I've heard it now, honestly.
yeah, no, they're having a laugh with that. In terms of, look, would older men, benefit from a little bit of TRT? Yes, absolutely. Is that what most of them are doing? Probably not. Probably they are probably doubling, tripling those doses.
Yeah. Put it this way.
Um, that's a very, very different thing. And for me, and I'll be absolutely frank with you, like I said, you don't need to take gear to do bodybuilding. And I won a couple of decent shows drug free after the kidney failure.
Mm.
But what I would say is that you just got to accept that when you're older, you're not going to look as good as you did when you're younger. And I think, you know, we all know people. We both know someone who recently passed away, um, my age,
Mm.
um, taking solid amounts of steroids, and it's like, would he have passed away if he wasn't doing that? Would he have got more out of life?
Probably.
And that everything indicates that he probably would.
Yeah.
And it's like it's not worth it. It's not worth it. Now, don't get me wrong. You can't live forever. You've got to enjoy your life.
Mm.
And if that's what makes you happy, it's not for me to judge people.
No.
But I no, and I'll be absolutely open with all the viewers now. I've took steroids at a high level. High level. I took a lot of gear for a long time. Probably didn't take the breaks that I was supposed to take. Took more than I was supposed to take. That's just what I did, and that puts me in a position where I can say to you, you probably have more longevity in your career if you don't do what I did, and that's the truth.
Yeah, I like I said, I've known you 20 plus years, Trev. So I would never sit here and judge anyone on it. It's their choice, their individual choice. So I had a client come to me, looked at his bloods, and I was more bothered about his cholesterol level than his low testosterone level. And what's he do? He goes and I'm going on the TRT. I'm like, right, okay. So he goes, yeah, well, I was told to do half a meg every 7 days. I went. He's openly admitted, said, "Sod it, I'm doubling it." And in fact, he double dosed, front loaded, and did 2 meg in the first 2 weeks.
Yeah, but I mean that's solid. That's solid doses.
Exactly.
Solid doses.
Exactly.
You could be growing on that. You should be growing on that.
Exactly.
And the reality is that's not TRT. That's not a level that's just gonna make you feel a little bit better. Just make it's not that.
No.
That's solid doses of gear. That's a solid course.
Yeah, no. I know that, you know that, and a lot of viewers will probably know that. But this is what I mean by this modern era now is people have got access to it in a lot more easier ways than back in the day. It was more underground, more just around bodybuilding. And now it's like, I can go get my TRT and I'll get this and I'll get that, etc., 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 etc.
Yeah, and I think society has become desensitized to people using drugs. I think, it's just, on a Friday night, a couple of pints, then someone calls for a bag. It's a meme. It's what people do these days. And, I remember Scott Horton always saying to me, if you can take a line off a toilet seat or stick a needle in you at weekends, it's steroids is nothing. Steroids is nothing. You don't care about steroids.
No.
We've seen over the years, we've seen people come out of jail, and they've switched their narcotics problem for a steroid problem because they just have to use something.
Yeah.
But that's just how it is. I think people are just desensitized to people taking steroids now.
Yeah.
And I think this HRT for older men is a gateway for that. If it's like, oh, you can take a bit of gear when you're 50, well, what about 40? What about 30? What about 20?
Well, exactly.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, this is what I'm trying to say is young people or younger than you or I in their 30s, I know a few people who are quite willing to think about their testosterone levels at 35 plus and go, oh yeah, actually, maybe I should go on TRT. You're 35.
35, you're in your prime.
Exactly.
In your prime.
But then they think it's a magic pill, mate. It's like this Ozempic and Mounjaro and all of the above.
You and I have both seen some people take a lot of gear and not look any good at all. It's just not. It's no replacement for training.
No, it's not.
But, train hard, good diet. There's no substitute for that. Everything else will just enhance it.
Yeah.
The guys who are good, and I remember I know a few people, not to mention any names, that they used tiny amounts of gear, and they looked amazing. I remember there was a fella you'll remember from my gym, Leon.
Yeah, I remember Leon.
Remember Leon?
Yeah,
he had a fantastic physique.
Yep.
Before he did anything. Before he did anything, he had a fantastic physique. And he took a little bit of something for one show, one time. He looks a little bit better.
Yep.
But he looked good anyway. I
Yeah,
think, it's like I've always said, like I said with James Hollins Ed, all those guys, the guys who are going to make it, I could tell you them when they were a teenager.
mm,
You know, you can't, and getting back to your point about, what makes the difference is that it comes down to genetics in the end. That's what creates your ceiling
yeah,
is your genetics.
yeah,
And
100%.
how long you can train and improve without taking any steroids will determine how close to your genetic potential you'll get.
Yeah,
Because if you're taking steroids too early, you'll hit a ceiling that is way below your overall ceiling.
mm, definitely, definitely. So with regards to like the last lot of bodybuilding we're just talking about, do you feel the future of bodybuilding is going to be just more and more and more mainstream, and it will get to a point where it's ridiculous? Or do you feel like it's going to have to sort of reform itself and take a good hard look and simplify it again?
Well, I think we're in that sort of stage. So, if you look at a lot of the guys from the 90s, and again, I'll caveat this with, a lot of people are using things that they didn't really understand
Oh,
in the 90s. We've seen a lot of people come through there, a lot of top guys have suffered health problems.
yeah,
So, there's been, we've had a few deaths with heart failures and that sort of thing. We've had, various health problems that have come out of that 90s period. And I think people have, at top level, are more educated. I think they are looking after themselves a bit better.
mm,
I mean, I remember judging Samson Duda in his first show. I remember him being a first timer at the Hercules at
yeah, yeah,
Colchester.
yeah, yeah,
Um, and again, a fella there, like for a first timer, probably could have would have had a good shout in the overall.
mm,
So, you know, again, that genetic potential was always there. You know, I'm talking about 15 years ago,
mm,
or at least, yeah, 10, 15 years ago that he did his first show.
yeah, yeah.
And, it's not been an overnight success for Samson.
No, it hasn't.
People have he's only been in people's, like, the mainstream view for 4 or 5 years. But I know he's been going for like 10, 15 years. I remember him competing.
Yeah,
So I think, people are taking a more gradual approach. I think they're more educated. I think the guys at top level are making better precautions. I think the physiques are more similar at top level than what they were in the 90s. I think in the 90s you had much more different variety of shapes and sizes, whereas now everyone's pretty much the same size. You know, much more similar physiques.
so for
And
you,
the
the
90s, you saw you had Ronnie Coleman,
yeah,
and then you had Sean Ray, who
yeah,
was much shorter, much denser, thicker physique. Then you had
Flex,
like Flex Wheeler, tiny joints, tiny waist, huge muscle bellies. You had a much different array of physiques than what you do now. I think now people look much more similar, and which makes it much more hard to judge.
so if you had to pick the ultimate era that you really, really like, which would it be?
I think my favorite Mr. Olympia was 1999.
Is that Ronnie's first year?
Yeah, yeah, that's my favorite era. You had peak Kevin Levrone,
Yeah.
you had peak Ronnie, peak Flex Wheeler. It was a fantastic show
Didn't
with
Dorian
a
was
lot of very different physiques.
Dorian's last show or the year before Dorian's last
Year
show?
before was Dorian's last show.
Last show, I thought it
Yeah,
was 28, yeah.
so I could have my dates wrong, but I'm pretty sure it was 1999.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I really liked that show. It's, if I go back to watching bodybuilding, that's one of the shows that I'll look at. Um, And nowadays, it's not, you know, you're picking what's best out of very similar physiques, which
Mm,
isn't that hard.
no.
Whereas now, but back then, you had different physiques with different attributes trying to judge against each other,
Well, yeah, you
which,
had.
which is a much more difficult process and much more objective.
It is. It is. I think the year, I think it was 2003 or four, Ronnie's third or fourth up against Jay. It's probably one of my favourites.
Hmm. I think for Ronnie, I would say 2001, I think was the best ever Ronnie.
Yeah.
I think best ever Ronnie Coleman was 2001. I think that's probably um, the best version of him. I personally think.
Yeah, that's the one
Um,
he came down in the purple shorts, purple pants, wasn't it? Yeah,
yeah,
it was absolute. And then the following year, he became that mass monster. And I think that was the year he did his video. He walked up a flight of stairs, and they said if he ate a Mars bar, he'd burn it off with the amount of muscle mass he's carrying up the stairwell or something like that.
something crazy. But I think that era, although that's my favorite era, it's what set the standard for what you have now.
Yeah,
It's become very much about size
yeah.
and less about shape.
But do you not think they're going to bring that in, or do you think the fact of it is you've got classic physique taking the shape size of it instead of
I think it's very
open
difficult. It's very, very difficult. And like, if we want to address the classic physique thing, it's like how if classic physique is a thing, how has Chris Bumstead made the transition from classic physique into men's bodybuilding in a matter of weeks?
Yeah, it's not.
He finished. He won the Olympia, and then a few weeks later,
Yeah,
he
yeah,
he came second in a open pro show.
yeah.
So the difference in classic and bodybuilding isn't that much then, is it? It's not enough
It's
to
not enough.
warrant it being
Well,
another class.
you could say, well, there's not a lot of difference apart from probably height and weight itself. Of Sean Clarida winning the show a few years ago, which one was it? He beat Regan Grimes in it, and I think it's in Europe somewhere. I can't remember the name of it. But yeah, he won that. He did that open class and won that. I'm like, well, he's a 212 boy.
Yeah, but it's not, for me that classic it's not really it's probably what bodybuilding should be, and what they should be doing is, and this would help everyone's health and everything. They should be putting it back into being more about shape. If you look at how bodybuilding should be judged on size, shape, and condition, um, shape is as big a factor as what size is.
Mm.
So, but size is in the open class clearly given more weighting than what shape is.
I've got a question for you then. Pittsburgh Pro. Did you see that?
No,
You didn't. So
just
Well, yeah, just gone. So Nick Walker versus Derek Lunsford. Nick Walker's come back from not competing at the O last year. Nick
Mhm.
Walker won on condition. Nick Walker won on probably five of the poses, and they drew. So Nick was winning on the prejudging. Derek, and it was 1 day show. Derek came back for the evening part, and they tied it. They called
Mm.
them both out, and I still think Nick to this day was a little bit robbed. But then you go on to the whole symmetry shape, where Nick is very much more blocky. Derek's a little bit more curvy, got more bigger, nicer muscle bellies, definitely nicer legs, less fat. There's no veins popping or anything like that, or shall we say varicose vein issues going on.
Mm.
Yeah, they drew on points and they gave it to Derek in the end. It was very, 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 very close, and I just thought it would be a lot more different. And how
Well,
many?
I think that's probably emphasizing their effort to pull it back into more of a aesthetic contest
Yeah.
rather than, you know, just worrying about what the scale weighs and the mass of the subject.
Yeah.
Essentially, like I said, the federation and the judges will dictate the future for it, and there's some difficult decisions that need to be made. And again, they need to penalise it.
Mm.
So, like for example, if you had like a bikini class and you think overall our bikini is getting too muscular,
Yeah.
then you've got to stop having the more muscular girls winning. Because if by having the more muscular girls winning or having the more muscular physiques winning, you're promoting muscularity as the overall factor for winning a show.
Yeah, well,
and so this is what makes consistency in judging important. In that we need to have a situation where someone comes to a show, they get their feedback, they go away, put that right, and can come back and improve next year. So what we've got to say is like, you know, if the only thing that we're saying is, oh, you're just not big enough, you're just not big enough, you're just not big enough, then everyone's going to get bigger and bigger all the time. We've got to start rewarding the things that we want to see more of.
Do you feel that judging as a whole, and I know from experience working with you, so I can comment on this, is you wanted consistency across the board on everything, and it always came across like that as much as possible. Yeah. But do you feel in certain federations though, one judge will like this sort of thing, or one head judge who will go away and try to have the overall say of everything, of the criteria is looking at, for, say for instance, bikini, will say, and that head judge of the show might like a softer look of a bikini girl, but the other 7, 5, whatever number of judges are going, well, no, we want the harder condition, do. Where a lot of the competitors might be in that, but the head judge is now looking for something softer. Do you feel that there's not enough consistency across the board?
Well, when I first started judging, I was alarmed at how inconsistent it was. And I think, you know, while judging is always going to be subjective, I think we need to have a fairly consistent set of rules and a fairly consistent interpretation of them. So what we've got to get away from, and what you'll see in a lot of shows, is that people will like physiques. Like now, a lot of judges are ex-competitors, and a lot of judges will like physiques that are similar to theirs because that's what they did, that's what they thought they should have won at, and that's what they think the winner should look like. And it's not that, because how do we get consistent feedback to athletes so that they can go away and come back next year and be better? We need to have consistency in the interpretation of the rules. So, you know, how do you weight that? You know, in terms of, we need to have an ideal. And once you've got an ideal and say, like, this is ideally what we're looking at, then, you know, we can have people in varying degrees of their closeness to the ideal. But without an ideal, it's very, very difficult. And we all need to share that same ideal.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's the hard part, is every judge.
It's a hard part because not everybody likes the same thing. Oh. But this is where judges have to get it into their head. It's not about what you like. Oh. It's about what fits the criteria we're working to.
I can remember first show I ever worked with you. There's criteria. Read it again, and read it again. Okay.
Yeah.
No worries, Trev. I'll do that. No problems. I'll read it 4 or 5 times. And ever since then, I've always gone into, you know, a WABBA show, and it's always, Trev, where's the criteria sheet, please? And it's there. And I'll always look per class and read off.
If you ask any actor, how do you know these lines? I read these lines 300 times. That's what I do. Yeah. I read the lines 300 times, then I know them. And that's what people have to do with the criteria. Read the criteria till you can't forget it.
No.
It's not, and this is, I cannot, I cannot say this enough. It's not about what people like. It's about the criteria.
Oh, it's what's on that piece of paper. You always said that, mate. You said, read this, look at this. If they don't fit this, they're not right. They're getting marked down. If they fit this, they're not getting marked down. They're staying at the top. It's not hard.
Yeah, we've been there. We've seen people. We've pulled them out for the show. I've got this girl. She's got fantastic legs. Great, but she's not bikini. Yeah, but her legs are great. Yeah, but they're not bikini.
Legs, no.
It's not bikini. Now you've got options. You either move her up to the next class,
yeah,
or she's coming last because it's not bikini. I love her legs. It's not about what I like. It's about the fact that she's not bikini. She's got to either move up, or she's got to be last.
Yeah, I said this. I said this to my ex, right? Okay. And if she ever listened to this, it would be very, very funny. She was trained by or coached by a quite a famous, shall we say, IFBB figure girl now in the UK, up north, shall we say, in Rotherham. And my ex used to be a bikini girl. And shall we say, this was pre-COVID. And over COVID, before I met her, shall we say she's put some size on those little pins of hers. And she sat right between wellness and bikini. And I'm sat there, I'm telling her, look, take a year out, another year, develop those legs a little bit more and compete the following year. No. She goes, I'm going to go to this coach. So she goes to this coach. Yeah, definitely get you into bikini. No problems. Yeah. I think it was 22-week prep. Yep. Went to the show. Yeah, too big, too muscular. Shouldn't be doing bikini. Came last. And I'm like, yeah, what part of there is a criteria? There's a criteria on this federation's website. I'm not going to name it. Okay. Bang. You do not fit that criteria. It's not hard.
Yes. But, you know, I've worked with plenty of athletes and they'll say, yeah, but this is the look that I like. Cool. Do that then. But you're not going to win bikini shows.
I had that with
I've had it with condition. I've had girls come in, great girls, great figures. Oh, no, I like to be harder. Yeah, but that's not going to win you in. You're going to be too hard. Yeah, but I like to be harder. Well, it's up to you.
I said this to my client at the Arnold's. She goes, I want to come in harder than I did for Toronto last year. I said, you ain't going to get it. What did she do? Came in harder. Yeah. What happened? Came fifth.
Yeah.
But yeah. Anyway, I'm really enjoying chatting to you, my old mate. But I've got a couple of things. We always like to finish these podcasts on some myths. So, the old myth of high reps equals toning. Trev, myth or fact?
It's a myth. In fact, the whole thing about toning is a myth. I mean, what is toning? Toning isn't a thing. Yeah. And, you know, you speak to any PTs, they'll tell you, you know, toning's a myth, which it is. But it's what people understand.
Exactly.
People's interpretation of toning is being the same size but firmer.
Yeah.
And we know that involves muscle growth and fat loss.
Yep.
To be the same size.
Yep.
And muscle growth is, you know, you just can't get away from the fact it's progressive resistance training.
Yep.
Muscle growth.
Yep.
You need to train heavier and heavier and get bigger and bigger. Now, you can progress with reps, but that's a very long way of doing things.
It is.
So, you know, I wouldn't say training low reps and low reps and high weights is not going to make you firmer. That's just not true. I think most people who are looking to tone up are probably not going to eat enough food to make, you know, moderate reps and moderate weight get them bulky. They're just probably
right. Too right. We won't bring the food conversation into this because it will go on forever. The amount of food. So, second myth: are supplements essential?
not essential. Supplements are exactly what they say they are. They're there to supplement holes in your diet. If you find you cannot eat enough protein, a protein supplement is a good way of bridging that gap. And the same with your vitamins. Anything that you feel that you can't easily get from your diet, um, you can supplement them. But I would always say that real food is probably the best way of getting anything.
I can remember Trev's chicken on his chicken grill machine back in the
That's
day.
right.
Oh, mate. And then your brother's hot sauce.
Brother's hot sauce. My brother's hot sauce got Sasha thrown out of the Navy, didn't it? Sasha, if you're watching, still sorry about that.
The amount of people have come in after Ron's hot sauce. Oh my God. Yeah, I've been on the toilet. Yeah, it's the best thing for prep. Trust us, it works. So, third and final myth, mate, before we finish up, is can you really outtrain a bad diet?
No, absolutely not. No matter how much training you can do, I can eat worse. And the reality is that the people that this podcast going out to, they can't do it. No, we've all seen the Michael Phelps during the Olympics thing, with him eating 14,000 calories and training twice a day, 2 races a day, and that sort of thing. We're not doing that. We're not Michael Phelps. We're just normal people, and we cannot. We just won't be able to.
I can remember a certain day that Trev was like smashing cheesecake slices like it was going out of fashion. I can remember those days, but they were very rare days.
I wasn't sort of out training a bad diet. I was just indulging in a bad diet. I'm not saying I did it, but you'll know for yourself. 80% of the time, my diet was bang on, and I would do that by eating like I would have probably 8 meals a day. I'd have one cheat meal a day or one cheat day a week off season.
Yep, I can remember Trev getting ready for, I believe it was 2011, might be 2012, the Arnolds. And yep, I can remember how clean your food was all the time.
All the time. And I was in the gym all day.
Yep.
So I was absolutely on show with everything that I was doing. Everyone, you could pop in and see me any time of day. I was in the gym from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. every day for that whole period.
Yep.
There was no hiding anything from anyone.
It was literally, oh my God. Yeah, those were the days. Honestly, guys, girls, if you ever had the luxury of going to Colosseum, it was literally old school training, old metal dumbbells, none of this plastic stuff nowadays, some proper old nice kit, and then we had our disgusting leg session day, and it started off with 20-10-10s. Now, Trev knows what 20-10-10s is, and there's probably going to be about 4 or 5 listeners on here who probably know what 20-10-10s are, and they will remember how much of a killer they were. And then, like I say, if you had the privilege of ever going into Colosseum, Trev used to do the finisher on calves, guys, girls, and it was disgusting because upstairs we had a stairs going up one side and then a stairs coming down the opposite side. And what did you make us do, Trev, for the viewers?
10 reps per step.
Yep, 10 reps per step. And that was, I think there was something like 26 steps.
22 steps actually, each side. 22 steps. So it's 440 reps.
There you are.
Finisher.
Yep. No, wasn't pleasant. Wasn't pleasant. Jelly legs, jelly calves. But hey, they made us grow at the time. But Trev, really appreciative of your time tonight, mate. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on here and catching up with you. Is there anything you'd like, one final say, a bit of advice to anyone who's really thinking about getting into bodybuilding? What would be your top 2 or 3 bits of advice?
If you're just getting into it, I would say my number one piece of advice would be your first show is just about if you can do this at all. You know, don't worry if you're not going to win, you don't win it. Just getting through that 16 weeks, getting to the end, getting a posing routine together, just making it to the end, that is the achievement in itself. You know, in an ideal world, you'll place. And if you do win it, don't let that go to your head. It's your first show. There's still a long way to go. And that's probably my number one piece of advice for anyone who's setting out to do a competition. And then, like anyone who's already established in it, I think the number one piece of advice I can give to anyone who's done a few shows is continual self-assessment is the key to improve. What I would like you to do is at the end of every day that of your prep, reflect on that day and think about what you could have done better that day and be your own harshest critic. You know, did you eat everything you were supposed to? Did you not eat anything you weren't supposed to? Did you not rest too much between sets? Did you not get caught up chatting in the gym? How close were you to being perfect? Just aim for one perfect day. And then when you've done one, aim for 2. And that is about the best advice I can give you.
Guys, girls, the original OG gunslinger. This guy had some guns back in the day, and he was known as Mr. Condition. Always brought it in on point. So, guys, girls, really appreciate your time, Trev. Okay, we're going to say goodbye. Thanks very much. And guys, girls, look forward to the next episode.